Situational scenario practice question, sample response and feedback. For reference, here's the MMI scenario again. Now let's hear a sample response.
Hi, I'm Chris. The first thing I would do is try to talk to the person moaning, see what their status was. It seems like they're conscious, but I would want to talk to them to see if there's sound, if they're able to speak, if they can articulate to me what exactly happened and why they are there. Hopefully it's something as simple as, oh, I left my keys outside and I'm tired, so I decided to sleep. If that was a scenario, I would, make sure after talking to them, making sure that they're okay. Ideally, that they have somebody inside the dorm that would look after them, whether it's, an RA or something like that. If they weren't okay, I would recommend that they go to the, campus hospital or another public area where they could be, monitored in case something happens. If they were not able to, in my opinion, be articulate, it seemed like something was off, I would probably call campus medical staff to either escort them over or have them come over to look into it. I think with something like that, you can never be too safe, especially because I wasn't there to know what happened before. And I would work with whoever came to show up or bring them to the facility until they pass off, and explain to them, what my interactions were, just to make sure that nothing was dropped between when I came across this person and whatever happened to the person next.
Let's analyze the student's answer. Keep in mind that just like you, he had 2 minutes to read the prompt and this was not rehearsed. Overall, I thought this was a great response. What made his response great was that he had a very logical and well-organized answer. I could follow his course of action from how he would react if the situation were not that severe, like if the person forgot his or her keys, to if the situation were extremely severe, like if the person was not responsive. Now, most pre-meds who will do the same MMI interview question will also have good instincts and responses. In my experience in being an MMI interviewer, most students will give a solid response like what we just saw. Again, my goal is to make your answers from great to above and beyond excellent. So, how will you stand out? Let's analyze his response more in depth using the 4 S's framework. In terms of structure, one way the student can improve his answer is to give a thesis statement or roadmap in the beginning. He could start off his response by saying, I would like to go through different courses of action depending on the severity of the situation. And then he could go through his entire answer. Like I mentioned earlier, I thought the student had a very well-organized response throughout. In terms of story, the student talked about what he would do in this situation based on whatever situation or scenario was going to face him. I like how he explored different possibilities. I also like how he would try to speak to the person to see how coherent and responsive the person is. From his response, I could really picture and visualize the student in action. However, the student did not bring in other personal stories or experiences. Doing something like this will make your answer above and beyond. For example, you could talk about how you have approached similar situations as your dorm RA, or you could talk about how you encountered several potentially drunk college students as an EMT. In our sample response, we'll add a personal story to give you an example of how to incorporate more of a personal experience. In terms of spirit, the student smiled and introduced himself in the beginning, which was great. Again, it makes a big difference if a student smiles and introduces him or herself. And he seemed friendly throughout the entire interview response. And finally, stamina. He was not tired or nervous appearing, and he was relaxed overall. Let's give an example of how we could take this student's response and make it even better. On the screen in front of you, these are some points that we just discussed about how the student could make his answer above and beyond. So here's the example. Hi, my name is Chris. I would like to go through different courses of action depending on the severity of the situation and explain how I would respond in each situation. The first thing I would do is to talk to the person moaning. It seems like the individual is conscious since he or she is moaning, but I would want to talk to them to see if they could speak or if they could articulate to me why they are there. Hopefully, it's something as simple as, I left my keys in my dorm room. If that were the case, and if I knew the student, I would help that person get into the dorm. If I didn't recognize the individual, I would ask for some type of identification, like a student ID card, to make sure that they are a student in the dormitory. Now, if the student looked a little intoxicated, which might be the case since it's a weekend night, I would try to make sure that the person could connect with another individual who could check up on them throughout the night, like an RA or the person's roommate. If the individual is coherent and responsive but doesn't look like a student, I would definitely not let the individual inside in this scenario. I would still ask the person how I could try and help them out. Maybe their phone battery died and they needed directions to a different part of campus. If it looked like the person were trying to sneak into the dorm, I would definitely inform one of the RAs or a security guard in the building. In my college campus, there's a security guard for every building since we live in an urban area. In my opinion, if the person didn't seem coherent or articulate, or something was just off, I would definitely call the campus police. I could easily call them with my cell phone, or there are a lot of blue lights around campuses where they directly call campus security and emergency medical services. I would stay with the student and wait until help arrived. I think with a situation like that, you could never be too safe, especially because I wasn't there to know what happened beforehand. Once help arrives, I would then explain how I found the individual and how he or she was doing in the short amount of time I spent there. Perhaps the student told me some information like I drank too much, or even worse, perhaps the student became less coherent. I think relaying that information to campus security and the medical staff is really important. I'd relay all this information and even go to the hospital or medical center and explain to them what my interactions were. I think this is the best way to ensure none of the information is dropped. In college, I was my dorm's RA for 2 years. Similar to the scenario in the prompt, I would have to figure out what was going on with a student and then try to triage how emergent the situation was. I had to deal with a wide variety of situations. Several students would lock themselves out and forget their keys in their dorm rooms. One time I found a student in the dorm hallway because his roommate urinated on him in the middle of the night. College is a difficult time, and a lot of students on my floor were depressed and needed help through our mental health services. I learned a ton while being an RA. First, it's important to keep an open mind and don't jump to any conclusions when you encounter a situation. I learned that it's really important to be non-judgmental. Second, I learned that there are a lot of resources and support out there, and sometimes students need to be connected or aware of those resources. I often had to think about whether a student needed resources, like, does he or she need to go to the residential college dean, or do we need to call campus safety? Did we need to bring the student to a hospital? So again, how I would react in this situation is to see how the person was doing, see what they articulated or couldn't articulate, and then go on from there. That sums up the feedback and analysis for this practice scenario. Remember the 4 S's: structure, story, spirit, and stamina. Good luck with your MMI.